Well, let me give you a little context about who we are, because it explains a lot about our requirements around networking and security and why it's so unique and demanding. With JetZero, what we're doing is we're building the next generation of aircraft. So we're not just tinkering with an airplane. We're here working on a project that's called a blended wing body. And this has the potential to transform aviation. So our product is going to be 30% more fuel efficient. And that's a huge improvement for airlines who are dealing with a target to be net zero by 2050. And every 7.5% increment that they don't achieve net zero, they're going to be purchasing carbon credits. So rather than just relying on sustainable aviation fuels, which there may not be enough to produce, just to give you an example, to get enough SAF, sustainable aviation fuel, food that comes from biofuels, you would need a pond the size of Colorado, West Virginia, and Maryland that could produce 100% without any error algae. Imagine harvesting that. I mean, we've all been in an airplane and flown over the state of Colorado. That's not big enough. And then you need them in multiple hemispheres so that you can do this year round. If you had that, and if there was no floods, famines, droughts, no issues with weather, no issues with terrorist attacks, you'd have enough sustainable aviation fuel to hit the target. So the industry knows that there's an issue, and changing the shape of the plane, making it more like a Frisbee than a Coke bottle, is going to simply change the lift over drag of the shape. Like you can take a piece of paper, you can wad it up in a ball and toss it, or you can turn it into an airplane, and you know which one flies faster. So the shape is determining the lift over drag ratio, and then it's weight and thrust after that. So if you have enough lift to take care of the weight, and you have enough thrust to cut through the drag, you fly. And that's the formula. So by changing the shape, it unlocks so much potential. And that's what we're doing. But because we're pushing the limits of engineering, and because it's a new shape, we have to be using compliance and FAA regulations. The innovation is happening all at once, and it's happening everywhere. So it can't just happen in certain places. That includes our infrastructure, right? So we need an infrastructure that can keep up with the pace that we're working. In the real world, the stakes around networking and security are very, very real. I'll give you an example. Right now, if we leave Guam and we go into the deep Pacific with our current tanker, we have enough fuel to deliver one, maybe two aircrafts. And then that tanker has to fly back. With our tanker, we're going to be able to do multiples and multiples of that as a payload. And that changes a lot, right? You know how important supply chains are to our defense system. So that technology is something that our adversaries and competitors would definitely like to get their hands on. And we're actually seeing that in our network. And thankfully, before we went too far into the public domain, we came out of stealth, and we had some issues with our current network. And I'll tell you in a minute how we found Nile, but it's been a tremendous uplift into our security. So on the security side, we're accountable to FAA, we're accountable to our investors, which includes, United and Alaska. We're partnering with Delta. We have around a $44 billion backlog in orders. We have the tanker project with the Air Force, and we're building the largest factory on Earth in the state of North Carolina. We received $4.7 billion, which is the largest deal in history for a non-public company, 10th largest deal of all time for any company. So we have the factory coming where we're going to be creating the planes. We're breaking ground in February of next year. We're going to be doing our first flight of our demonstrator airplane in 2027. And that's being built right now with our partner Northrop Grumman in the Mojave Desert. And then in 2028, we'll have our first plane built. 2029, we'll be testing and flying that plane, certifying it by 2030. So 2031, we'll be delivering 8 planes. And then we'll be scaling up to a plane a day by 2036 from this factory. In 2033, we announced our European or Asian factory. And then in 2038, we announced either the Asian or European factory, depending on which one we went with. So the target is to have 3 factories by 2041, and then be producing almost $1 trillion in revenue by 2045. So the stakes are very, very high for us and for the industry. So on the performance side, our engineers, they're constantly collaborating. They're sharing very large files, running simulations. The last time a competitor entered the market, a major competitor was Airbus, and they did it in the late 70s, and they did 24 wind tunnel tests, right? And so they're going back and they're physically testing the airplane, physically changing the airplane. We're able to run 1,000 simulations on a weekend. And we've actually completed a wind tunnel test with Northrop Grumman. These tests cost into the millions of dollars to do per test. And our net learnings were around, what we can do with 100 simulations when we're doing 1,000 over the weekend. What we could do with 100 simulations was kind of the net learning of what we had from the single wind tunnel test. So, if Airbus can do it in a room full of paper with half of the team smoking cigarettes, not even having a fax machine, imagine what we can do today with digital twins, simulations, an order backlog, funding, and support from the smartest people in the industry. But if we don't have a good network and we don't have good security, that's one of the things that can absolutely stop us. So here's where we ran into problems, and here's where Nile came in to help. We were doing traditional solutions, right? We were working with the top brands, the number one and number two brand in the industry. And we were working with, the best teams in the industry to deliver those brands. But the complexity was overwhelming, right? We are a startup. Right now, we're 250 people. We're scaling to be 14,556 people by the time we're printing a plane a day out of our factory in 2036. So we're growing very, very fast. And the focus is on engineering, and we had a lesser focus on the IT team. So it was a lot of work on IT to make sure that we were keeping up with the pace. We were laying on VLANs, ACLs, NACs, appliances, firewalls. We were doing bolt-ons, all the things that you're very familiar with. But the result was a solution that was not cohesive, right? A lot of these things you're having to, it's like you're putting an entire car together, right? You get the product and it comes with all these boxes, and you literally have to assemble it, configure it, and then you have to do the overwhelming job of maintaining it. And when you're a small team, it's very, very difficult, and it's very fragile, and it's very hard to manage. I was previously head of architecture governance at Gulfstream before I came to JetZero, and we were always having network issues. Network issues was just the name of the game. Hundreds of tickets a month with network issues, and we had one of the best networking teams in the world using the best networking technology in the world. And it was just part of what you're used to, because when you're in a hangar like this one, you have a lot of issues. You have a lot of interference from the nearby airport, and the doors are always opening and closing, and it's a lot of electromagnetic interference that comes in at different points in time. We have large groups of people coming through here to do tours, and so they're bringing in their devices, and then we're on webinars and we're meeting with investors. And when you're doing it in an environment where the internet is constantly cutting out on you, it doesn't build confidence with who you're speaking with. So all of that was to say that we needed something where, instead of spending all this time, fighting with the network, we needed something that was going to be like electricity, where it was just going to be on, and something that we could rely on and enable our mission. But that was what we were looking for, but that was a dream, because that didn't exist in the real world, at least as far as I knew. But it turns out it does. So, at first, I'll admit I was skeptical when I met Suresh and the Nile team, because it just stood out as something that seemed like a magic fix. But their philosophy was completely different, and that resonated with us, because our philosophy on what we're doing at JetZero is also very different. But it wasn't like, here's another tool that you could put in your stack. What it was like, what if the fabric itself was secure by default? So, I was definitely skeptical, but I listened, because it seemed like their approach with micro segmentation and identity-based access, like that's where it became clear that this is not the old model with bolt-on and just endless tuning, configuring, rebuilding, troubleshooting, tickets, like that endless cycle. What they were talking about was about building security like into the fabric, into the actual like DNA, the way the network worked. And they were able to quickly, show us a twin of our network, which was like, okay, this is the first time that, I've actually seen a working twin of our network. No one else did that for us. I'm sure they could, but they didn't. And it was very little effort and it was like quick. So that was cool. So for someone like me who didn't have a bunch of like, a super deep bench, like I didn't have 5, 10, network specialists working to keep things running. A lot of times it was, myself, like getting in there and like trying to do access points because there were so many issues. It was all hands on deck. So what harm did we have if we let Nile, test it? Like, where's the harm, right? Like right now it's a complete disaster. So if we bring in a second network and we test it, what could go wrong? And what actually happened is it went viral is what happened. It was people were standing by the Nile access points and they were like showing their computer like with the speed test, it was like 800 megabits, 1,000 megabits. And it was like people were posting on like the Teams chats and they were just like, the team was just so excited. You could just feel like the sense of relief instead of being like on airplane mode where you walk in and it's like you have no Wi-Fi. It's like airplane mode. It went from, 3 megabits here, 20 megabits there to just being able to get like an 800 megabit connection like everywhere. People were like getting into like the tunnels of like rooms to see what the speed test was. It felt really good. So we decided that we were going to move forward with Nile and to share what it was like after deployment because the test was real. So first of all, it was complete simplicity. The team just it made it to where our guys didn't even have to log in to do anything at all. We just kind of had this dashboard where we could see what was working and what devices were on and who was on. So you could see like the micro segmentation. We didn't have to manually configure anything. The team came in, they fixed some of the cabling, and then they plugged it in, and then they left. And I was kind of like, is that it? Is there anything we need to do? And it was all handled in a way that was just like pretty much invisible to my team, which is how you want. And I did a PLM migration. We have a Siemens PLM environment, and we had a team come through, and they moved it from Microsoft to AWS GovCloud. And no one said a word, right? No one said like we're having problems. No one said thank you. And like being in IT, like that's what we want. We want to be able to be invisible and reliable. Like we don't want people to like notice like this is amazing because it should just always be amazing, right? So we don't want to get the thank yous. We don't want to get the complaints. We just want to deliver amazing all the time to where that just becomes the standard, right? Like nobody goes home and turns on their TV and they're like, I can't believe I'm watching TV right now. It just is expected. So like when they come to work and they turn on technology, you just want it to be expected. And that's when you actually have like a real peace of mind that you can focus on strategy and doing other things. So secondly was like the performance. Like immediately, right away, our engineers noticed like, hey, there's no more dead spots. There's no more bottlenecks. The team, like you can tell right now, the coverage is fantastic. Audio, video, everything's great. Previously on the previous network, I would have had to have like, found the ideal spot. I would have asked people like, hey, I'm going to be in a meeting. Please don't take my bandwidth. But not the case. I could just go on a walk around the hangar and go from access point to access point. It's 90,000 square feet here. It's 300,000 square feet on campus, 16 acres. I could just literally walk around the building with this device and not get dropped and not have any glitches. So completely smooth. It didn't feel like I was buying something that I had to, worry about. It was like I was actually buying a product that delivered something, and I had a partner that was able to help us design that network. I didn't have to really give requirements other than a floor plan, and then they showed up and And they've measured everything twice, and then they cut once, and they delivered perfection. So, at JetZero, we're really focused on changing the future of aviation. And it feels in a lot of ways like Nile is a sister company because they're definitely changing the future of networking. We cannot be we cannot take chances with our network. We can't go legacy. We can't do things the way that our competitors are doing things and expect to deliver a better result. And thankfully, that's not what we did. We went with network as a service. It's given us a foundation where we don't have to choose between security and performance, and we can just focus on the real mission, which is building the future of aviation. So very grateful to what Nile's done for us, and I'm a huge advocate of Nile for the changes that I've felt that have been very real at JetZero.